Happy New Year and welcome to January, or what we like to call crunch time in the world of college basketball. Today on Locked On Women's Basketball, we are so excited to talk about one of the newest 4-team events that is coming up this month, the Coretta Scott King Classic on January 20th. Time to dive into it all right here today.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, friends. It is Monday, January 6, 2025. Yes, you heard it right. Time to dig out of those holiday ruts and get back to it no matter what, whether it's snowy, sunny, raining, or wherever it is that you are today. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick, national correspondent and college basketball analyst. Thank you so much for joining us here on Locked On Women's Basketball. Your favorite podcast now is a newsletter, introducing the Locked On NBA Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On NBA newsletter. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Win or lose, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, every so often, we get to put our conference schedules aside in the month of January in the world of women's basketball. And this year, it is the launch of a very special event that is coming up in 2 weeks on Monday, January 20th. I am so honored and happy to have today Michael Neuman, co-head of Playfly Sports Consulting, with me here to talk about the inaugural Coretta Scott King Classic, an event with huge impact on and off the floor and set to showcase 4 of the very best teams in the country as well. Michael, welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. Thank you so much on a snowy day where you are. Yep. The sun is out where I am. The snow has cleared, but it means that it's basketball season. And the beauty of this is that we are going to be embarking and have an opportunity to witness a lot of people in person and those of us that'll watch on television, what is going to be a great 4-team event coming up on January 20th. I want to start. I need you to tell me and to tell all of our listeners and those that are watching kind of how you as Playfly Sports Consulting and then HBSE, which is Harriet Splitzer Sports and Entertainment, sort of how you all came together and said, we want to do something in this women's basketball space.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for the kind invitation to join you today and to talk about this historic event. It starts with Playfly's commitment to our college business and, most importantly, women's sports. We feel we have a responsibility at Playfly, where we sit in the sports business ecosystem, to be an advocate for the advancement of women's sports. The head of our college properties division is a former Stanford player. She won a national championship in 1992. I mean, she's my colleague. How great is that? So the whole entire organization was really, behind this effort. But it really started back in the summer of 21 when the NCAA released its external review on gender equity. Right. And it clearly showed, and I'm sure as a former player, you paid very close attention to this study because it showed that staggering difference in inequities between men's and women's athletes, right? Specifically Division I basketball. Mm-hmm. So I'm also a girl dad, right? Competitive athlete daughter, someone who works in sports on a daily basis. And I read that and I personally wanted to help elevate the game. Mm-hmm. So the first thing that I was able to do was take a regular season women's basketball game between UCLA and UConn, which was December of 21. So about 6 months after the report came out, and put that game on ABC Sports. The most interesting statistic about that fact, it was the only time in the storied history of ABC Sports that a regular season women's college basketball game was ever on that network. Mm-hmm. And that game did close to 1 million views. And I knew at that moment that the time had come that we should be doing more to elevate women's sports. And keep in mind that those numbers, the million views, that was a full season and a half before someone like Caitlin Clark took off and really became a household name. So that's the background. I'm not going to pause and see if you have any other questions, but from there, we really accelerate into how we got to today.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And it's one of the things that we talk a lot about on this podcast, myself, with the people that come on and join me, all of my colleagues at the Next. I think that was the idea of why the Next has grown in such a rate of which it has, because of the interest. But we also know that with more eyeballs and more scrutiny and intensity, that it does get a little bit more intense. But I think from that perspective, we've all looked to say, what can we do to continue to elevate the game in those ways? As you then move forward and say, well, now you make that next step, right? And you continue to see the elevation and the amount of eyeballs and the butts and seats and all of the things that we want to continue to see for women's basketball. What were your next steps in saying, hey, let's go from a one game, two teams, to expand this into something that can be even bigger and better?
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I did feel like I had the permission to kind of get into that mix and try to create something new. And so I started working with Fox to create a women's event with two games and 4 teams. And that became actually an event that took place last month here in New York, in Brooklyn, called the Women's Champions Classic. Yeah. So at my old agency, along with Fox and UConn, we created that event. But when I left my old agency and I came over to Playfly 2 summers ago, I had to leave that property behind. But when I got to Playfly, I did re-engage Fox on the idea to create a second marquee event in the New York tri-state area, also with top women's teams. And we kind of focused on the Martin Luther King Day holiday. Fox had run a few men's games the previous year, and the ratings were really good. Plus, as sports fans, we've started to see more sports programming coming online around Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So it seemed like an ideal time because, one, it's a national holiday. Schools are closed. Great opportunity for middle school, high school girls teams, AAU teams, community groups, Girl Scouts. It seemed like a great opportunity to really galvanize the New York tri-state community. But the most important thing was the commitment from Fox to create destination TV for women's basketball fans every year. Yeah. So what Playfly and Fox wanted to do was replicate what the NBA has successfully done with Christmas Day, and of course the NFL with Thanksgiving, ever since I was a kid. So with that, the event idea was hatched, and then we went looking for a venue. And again, I'll pause to see if you have any questions.
Well, I think your mention of Fox is very interesting to me, just because I feel, like you said, that we're in this space of which these networks and these executives are understanding. They're understanding what people are tuning into, that college sports continue to be such a destination for fans, but women's basketball is unique in its own right as well. So I guess my question to you may be more on that television investment of finding that media partner. Was that a tough conversation, or was it one where they said, you know what, this resonates with us, we want in?
Yeah, great question. So if you go back to the 21 event with UConn and UCLA, one of the executives at Fox was a business partner of mine in that last endeavor. And so he also had a front row seat to the reaction that women's basketball fans had from a viewership perspective around the country. So now, as a Fox executive, we started to talk about eventually what became the Women's Champions Classic, which was a great success. So it wasn't as hard, at least in today's environment, putting together an event like this that exclusively focused on women's sports. Maybe it would have been harder 5 years ago, but as you referenced earlier, women's sports and specifically women's basketball have really been on a huge upswing. And the time was right, and there was zero hesitation on behalf of our partners at Fox. This is something that all parties wanted to be a part of.
Well, we have seen in multitude of cases how media partners are coming to the table and understanding women's sports in general are a great investment. Women's basketball, I think, probably one of those at the very top. All right, in just a moment, more with Michael, and we are going to talk about the impact of this event, bring it to the forefront, the message that it has, and not only the great partnerships they've had on the media side, but who is really the marquee piece of this and the center of why they are there. First, a message from our friends at PrizePicks. Basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way to get real money action while watching your favorite NBA stars than with PrizePicks. Whether you're a diehard fan or just love some friendly competition, PrizePicks makes it fun and easy to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. Here's how it works. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Think LeBron going for 30, or maybe Luka gets more than 8 assists if he's healthy. PrizePicks lets you make your predictions and put your money where your mouth is in just 60 seconds. And there's the PrizePicks Flex Play option. Even if one of your picks doesn't hit, you can still double your money. Now, this is the perfect time to join. So download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right. No need to win to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick. Welcome back to Locked On Women's Basketball. So happy to be joined by Michael Neuman. He is the co-head of Playfly Sports Consulting, and they are the leaders, the people that are at the forefront of putting together what is going to be a fantastic showcase of women's basketball on Monday, January 20th. In the Coretta Scott King Classic, which will be held at the Prudential Center in New Jersey. Michael, we've been talking about how this idea kind of came to be, where you all sat, finding the right partners. And then it's about position, and it's about thinking about how college sports, women's basketball especially, can impact in other ways. And I think that is, so it seems, as that is something that you all have found here. And from reading the information that was provided to me and the releases that you guys all sent out, this is the first sports licensing deal, so to speak, with the King estate. Talk to me about how that came to be and why this was the right time for them to be engaged in something like this.
Sure. So there was a couple of themes that began to evolve. We've talked about one, the rise of women's sports. If you take a look at that report from 2021, the inequities between men's and women's sports, D1, especially basketball, now we're talking about, right, gender equality. And what we've seen over the last couple of years, especially with women's sports, is really powerful, strong personalities, players that are really changing the game, right, bringing corporate support into women's sports, NIL deals, endorsement deals. So we're seeing female empowerment. And if you're going to create an event on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, you have to celebrate diversity in sports, right? So we have the intersection of diversity in sports and cause or purpose. And so this all led us to reaching out to the estate of Dr. Martin Luther King and many months of incredible dialogue about creating history around the licensing arrangement that would put the 4 decades of advocacy by Coretta Scott King after her husband's assassination, the work that she did really into the forefront and create a licensing deal with the King estate that has never happened before.
I think you have hit on a couple of things there that I want to go back to. Number one, we talk about empowerment, but I think you have to think about the longevity as someone who is both a civil rights, but a human rights stalwart in Coretta Scott King herself. In all of that time after her husband passes away, we spend a lot of time on Martin Luther King Day every day of celebration of what he set forward. But I think some people forget what happened after that.
Mhm.
As you think about positioning something like this, it seems as though women's sports, women's basketball, this is almost, it was like perfect if you could get all of the pieces of the puzzle to fit together.
Yeah, it's a great point. When I was considering names for our event, I was speaking with Juliana Smith at Baylor one day, and we were talking about these same exact themes. And she and I were focusing on the work and advocacy by Coretta Scott King during the 4 decades of her life after her husband's assassination. And collectively, that light bulb went off. And we both realized that our event should honor her because the themes we talked about earlier are almost exactly the full body of her work in those 4 decades. So that was the leading conversation with the estate when we brought this to them. And I think there was this incredible pause in recognizing, wow, not only does this make sense, but when I reached out to people around women's college basketball and I talked about this idea, I would often have a long pause at the end of the conversation. These are high-ranking people at the top programs around the country and in college conferences. There would be a long pause, and then someone would say, wow, I have the chills.
Right.
Or I would speak to, Vic Schaefer at Texas, and he would say, Michael, I'm a product of the civil rights movement. I grew up in the South. Dr. King is one of my heroes. I would be honored to participate in an event that celebrates Dr. King and the legacy of Coretta Scott. So it seemed to make so much sense. And we're just so grateful that the estate of Dr. Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott recognized the opportunity that exists here.
Well, and I also think that one of the things that was a common theme for Dr. King himself prior to his assassination, but all throughout then the next 4 decades of which she worked, was thinking about raising the next generation of leaders and of advocates and of people that do that. And that's one of the beautiful parts that comes from college athletics. It doesn't matter if it's at the Division II level, the D1 level, if you're playing, on Fox, or if you're playing, just in the Division III national championship for soccer. All of that kind of lays the groundwork of what we've always said is the unique side of college athletics. To me, we go back to that synergy of these two concepts. And how important was it for you all to think, let's do this in the right way, let's find that partnership, and let's really make this happen?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I might be getting the quote wrong here, but Dr. Bernice King recently said in some of the content that we shot that during a time when the recognition of female empowerment is on the rise and the fight for gender equality in sports is beginning to finally bear fruit, honoring my mother through a women's college basketball event bearing her name is timely and fitting. And I don't think there was any greater validation for the group of people that helped put this together than to hear the daughter of Dr. King and Coretta Scott to say something like that and recognize that we were in the right place at the right time with the right group of partners. And I've been doing this a long time, and I have my fingerprints on a lot of different events over my career. But easily, this is one of the things, and we haven't even had the event yet, but this is one of the things I'm most proud of. And I can't wait for 2 weeks from today to see this whole thing come to life.
Well, what we haven't mentioned to everyone yet is who actually is going to play the games. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But oh, by the way, you get to see UCLA, Baylor, Texas, and Maryland. Those are the 4 teams that will be going to the Prudential Center, New Jersey, for this inaugural Coretta Scott King Classic. I thought it was also incredibly interesting, Michael, very quickly before we take another moment, but that there are a lot of historical ties of Dr. King to New Jersey and to that area. How did you find the Prudential Center? Is this kind of how your operations work there with Playfly and your other partners? Why was the Prudential Center going to be the right spot for these games?
Great question. A couple of answers to that. Number one, the Prudential Center is a top 5 Polestar venue in the US. I mean, they are a leading provider of sports and entertainment experiences to the New York tri-state area. I've worked with them previously on the Never Forget Tribute Classic and the Legacy Classic HBCU event with Michael B. Jordan. They're in the heart of a rich and fertile recruiting area for top teams. I mean, a lot of the coaches, when we're speaking to them, love the idea of coming up to New York in season to potentially, see some recruits as well as, commit to their, potential recruits that, hey, look, there's a good chance we're going to be back in the New York tri-state area. I mean, we have a young girl from who's on the Maryland team that grew up in Edison, New Jersey. So she has an opportunity to play right around the corner from where, she grew up. Also huge alumni bases for most of these top schools in the New York tri-state area, but also a big void, right, in having top women's teams come to New York. I mean, forever we've had top men's teams, playing at the Garden, playing at Barclays, playing at Prudential Center. Not having the women's teams come to those same venues has created an opportunity. And yes, to your point, a good 10 years of Dr. King's life in Southern New Jersey and some of the early work he did in his career created a nice connection to the state of New Jersey for us.
Well, it couldn't be even better. And as you're right, I mean, I know growing up, I mean, you watch all of those games that happened in the Garden. You go back to thinking about the NIT Final Four being played at the Garden, all of those things. And that's fantastic. And it's the memories and the things we think about when we think college basketball, but it's going to be even better to showcase women's basketball within this platform as well. So hats off to you guys and finding a fantastic partner.
Yeah,
all right. Now,
I was just going to say, if you think about the 2 events that will be in New York this year, the one that happened last month and then ours, there's a high probability that one of those teams wins the national championship this year. I mean, there's a good possibility. There's some great teams that are out there, USC, Notre Dame, South Carolina, but there's a chance that, our event could look like what a Final Four looks like.
No doubt about it. Well, we're going to talk about those 4 teams in just a moment. They are going to be playing on Monday, January 20th. Well, a message from our friends at FanDuel: from big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, some game parlays, and so much more. Our listeners know I live in Kansas City, so get ready to put your money on those beautiful Kansas City Chiefs, my friends. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Hello, everyone. Missy Heidrick. Thank you for listening and for watching today on Locked on Women's Basketball. It has been a true pleasure to have Michael Neuman, who is the co-head of Playfly Sports Consulting, join us today. And we are talking about what will be the inaugural Coretta Scott King Classic. It will be played on Monday, January 20th. 4 outstanding teams, 4 outstanding programs, 4 amazing coaches. And oh, by the way, 3 of the 4 ranked in this week's AP Top 25, Top 10. All right, Michael, let's just talk a little bit about these teams. As you said, not hard to sell these coaches on the opportunity to do this. It is unique because they've got to put a pause on their conference schedule and how they prepare and how they do that. But with that said, UCLA is going to take on Baylor. Texas is going to take on Maryland. This is shaping up to be some fantastic matchups. Your thoughts on just, I don't know if you could have maybe scripted it any better, but I think for right now, you're set for 2 really, really good games.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, kudos to the conferences, because the conferences, I think this is what you're alluding to. Conferences had to make sure that the teams had their bye waiver. These are non-conference games in conference season. A lot of these teams are traveling great distances. The conferences wanted their teams represented in an event like this. And then the conferences also did a great job of working with these teams on their travel schedule, both, their games before and their games after. I mean, if you're a team like UCLA, number one in the country, longest distance travel coming all the way across country, it's very important that, Coach Close is not, taking on a Maryland and a USC, sandwiched between our game. So I give the conferences a lot of credit for the cooperation that they've extended to us. But you're right, like the UCLA Baylor matchup is a strong one. Baylor's 12-3. I mean, there's 4 losses between the 4 teams, and we're 1 week into January. And then the Texas Maryland, you have 1 loss between the 2 teams. And in the second game, you have 14 McDonald's All-Americans between the 4 teams, all appeared in the NCAA tournament. So yes, you're right. We could not have scripted a better group of teams to be a part of our inaugural event.
Well, you've got UCLA. They are still number 1 in the AP poll. They are 15-0. As you said, Baylor, they're 12-3, 2-1 in Big 12 play. Texas sits at 15-1. Maryland's still undefeated. They are at number 8. Texas at 5 this week in the poll. 3 Power 4 conferences represented, which I think is a great testament, number one, to all of you for kind of expanding that global reach and think, you could simply have gone and maybe could have gone with 2 and mix and match. But I think at least having 3 out of those 4 Power 4 conferences is a big piece of this and will draw. As you've talked with those coaches above and beyond, was there a conversation with them to say, all right, you commit here, we're going to get you a quality opponent that down the road will help you, even if you do put a pause on that conference schedule?
Yeah, that was a big part of the outreach to the coaches. They played a big role in selecting who they played. As you know, as a former player and being in the industry, it's a small industry. Relationships are critically important. Coaches go at each other, during their games, but behind the scenes, everyone's really on the same team and everyone understands how the game is played. And so these non-conference neutral site events do positively, if you win, positively impact seeding when it comes to March. And so, when I was talking to Coach Close, and I give her a ton of credit, she wanted to come back to the Prudential Center. She was the first coach to commit. It was her idea to play Baylor, as I was explaining to her which teams we were talking to. Baylor and Maryland are Playfly schools. We're so excited, to have them participate. But we were going after really the best 4 that we can get. And we put this together after the NCAA tournament last year. So not easy to do. So to your point earlier, we definitely did hit a little bit of a luck streak here.
Which is okay, because it's going to make for fantastic television and for all the people that are going to be there in person to be able to watch. My last question for you will be surrounding the student athletes. I know you said that you all have put together and throughout the course of those games that people will be able to watch on Fox on Monday, January 20th. There'll be pieces done with the King family, etc. Are you and will you all tap a bit into the student athletes, to the young women that will be part of that, maybe help them share their stories, get their feedback, get their thoughts on being part of this amazing inaugural event?
That's a great question. We are in the process of doing that. We do not have all of our content completed with all the student athletes, but I did see some of the content from Texas the other day, and it's really strong. And I've seen the content from Dr. Bernice King, and the content is really strong. And we do want this event to have a deeper purpose, a next level meaning to it. Obviously, as I said earlier, the intersection of diversity in sports and female empowerment. I think an event like this will mean different things to different people, but we want it to be a day that not only celebrates great basketball, but we also want to celebrate the legacy of Dr. King and Coretta Scott and the work that she has done to really drive gender equality and female empowerment. And we do see a a lot of that coming through in the conversations we're having as we create content for the venue attendees, as well as the audiences that will watch nationally on Fox.
I love it, because I think, as you and I will probably be very much in agreement, that some of our best future advocates and those that are stepping forward are the ones that are in the trenches that are doing it right now. And those student athletes are the ones that we should continue to elevate and share their stories. And they do a great job of doing that themselves. Michael, I would tell for everyone who's out there listening and watching, if you are in the tri-state area and you want to come to the games on January 20th, how is someone to go about getting tickets?
Tickets are available at Ticketmaster or PruCenter.com. Please, if you live in the tri-state area, if you are interested in supporting women's basketball, if you have children that play basketball, boys or girls, it is rare to find an event like this in the New York tri-state area, especially on a day that kids are out of school.
You got it.
So if you want to be indoors and out of the element, coming to the Prudential Center on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, January 20th, just 2 weeks from today, it will be a great place to be.
Awesome. And if you are not there, or you're anywhere else in the country like me, then you turn on Fox and you will be able to see both of these outstanding matchups, UCLA and Baylor, Texas and Maryland. Michael, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing the backstory of how this all came to be. I think everyone is so looking forward to not only the story of which will be told, but the basketball that we get to watch on January 20th. Thank you for bringing this to the forefront and bringing it to women's basketball. Those of us in the trenches, we appreciate it.
Absolutely, our pleasure. Thank you for all that you're doing to provide advocacy for women's basketball and women's sports. And I really appreciate the honor of the invitation to be here today.
Absolutely. Well, it has been wonderful to be here. Michael Neuman, co-head of Playfly Sports Consulting. If you're not going to be there in person, January 20th, Monday the 20th, turn to Fox Sports to see two outstanding games. They will be on our must-watch list. There's no doubt about it. Well, everybody, please make sure you follow this podcast at Locked On WBB, and then go see all of my amazing colleagues over at thenexthoops.com. We have you covered. Your favorite podcast now has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On NBA Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. And start your day with all the new free Locked On NBA newsletter. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week. Get yourself ready. Great games coming up all throughout this week across the country, whether it's snowy, sunny, wherever you are, you know there's women's basketball to be watched.